Welcome to this nostalgic deep dive into some of the quickest and most iconic American muscle cars of the 1970s. We will explore 10 legendary machines that roamed the streets during a time when horsepower was king, big cubic inches were the norm, and manufacturers were locked in fierce competition to build the fastest factory rides. These cars hold a special place in automotive history, and for good reason. They combined brute force, style, and a whole lot of attitude. With massive engines under their hoods, aggressive styling cues, and distinctive exhaust notes, they captured the imaginations of countless enthusiasts who lived during that magical era. Even younger fans who were not old enough to own or drive them at the time have come to appreciate their raw appeal through magazines, car shows, and stories shared by older gearheads. Let's dive in and rank them according to their approximate 0 to 60 miles per hour times, as recorded in period magazine testing or contemporary recreations. We will then look at what each of these beasts cost when brand new and compare that to the jaw-dropping sums they command at today's auctions. By doing so, we will capture not only the performance and excitement, but also the incredible investment potential these dream cars represent. At the same time, we will take into account the disclaimers that times can vary based on factors like transmission choice, rear-end gear ratios, tire technology, and testing conditions. We will also remember that these horsepower ratings are often from the era of gross measurement, which tends to read higher than the net ratings that came into effect later. As we travel back in time, we will also mention how the styling of these cars, the comfort features offered, and the engine choices all contributed to their enduring appeal. Most importantly, we will keep a focus on the sense of nostalgia that surrounds them. There's something visceral about these machines that has kept them in the hearts and minds of enthusiasts for decades. Let us begin our journey, and do not forget to hold on tight. In our next section, you will hear the story behind these muscle car battles and how their options influence their reputation. Get ready to be amazed. Before we jump into each specific car, let us set the stage of the early 1970s. American performance car culture was at its peak, with major manufacturers locked in intense rivalry to claim the quickest 0 to 60 times and quarter-mile sprints. Insurance companies were scrambling to adjust premiums for younger drivers, and concerns about emissions were just beginning to surface, meaning horsepower was still largely unfettered. During this golden window, every brand had its champions. Chevrolet, Dodge, Plymouth, Ford, Pontiac, Buick, and Oldsmobile all laid claim to muscle or pony cars that packed monstrous V8 engines, often measuring well over 400 cubic inches. Many cars carried big block mills capable of delivering an enviable surge of torque that pinned you into the seat under full throttle. It was not just about raw power. Styling and marketing played a massive role in selling these cars. Wild graphics, bold striping packages, and menacing hood scoops became defining traits. Options like spoiler wings, ram air induction systems, and wide racing stripes made these cars stand out at dealerships and on the street. Buyers had no shortage of factory or dealer-installed options to further personalize their rides, from close ratio manual transmissions to aggressive rear-end gear ratios. Furthermore, each division had high-performance packages or limited edition trims that added distinctive flair and improved performance. Names like Stage 1, HEMI, Super Duty, LS6, Boss, and Ram Air 4 became the stuff of legends. One critical piece of the puzzle is that the 1970s saw the apex in horsepower and torque ratings before regulations and fuel concerns took hold. By 1972 and 1973, compression ratios were already dropping, horsepower ratings were revised downward, and catalytic converters were on the horizon. That is precisely why the early part of the decade remains a high watermark for muscle car fervor. These were cars that could be picked up at relatively affordable prices and then driven straight to the drag strip to lay down serious times. Many owners also loved customizing them even further, making each example unique. Next, we will dive into one of the most surprising contenders for a high-powered ride, proving Buick knew how to mix comfort with serious performance. Let us begin with a car that might initially surprise some who think of Buicks as cushy cruisers for an older demographic. In 1970, Buick decided to go toe-to-toe with the fiercest muscle competition by taking its mid-size Skylark platform and infusing it with serious go-fast hardware. The result was the Buick GS455, especially in the Stage 1 trim. This package meant you got a monstrous 455 cubic inch V8 producing a factory-rated 360 horsepower and a staggering 510 foot-pounds of torque. Thanks to that big block might, the GS455 Stage 1 was capable of 0 to 60 miles per hour times in the mid-5-second range, often cited around 5.5 seconds by Period magazine tests. Although there can be variations based on gear ratios or transmissions, those are still stunning performance numbers for a Buick in 1970. The GSX option package, introduced around the same time, could be added if you desired an even bolder appearance. That gave the Buick bright paint colors, bold striping, a spoiler, and an upgraded suspension bits. However, even in its Stage 1 form, you were left with a car that looked relatively understated compared to some flashier counterparts. That understated look only served to make the car more of a sleeper, especially if you kept it in the more subtle color schemes. When brand new in 1970, a well-optioned GS455 Stage 1 with the extra trim could approach $4,800, which was not cheap for the day. Today, pristine examples that have been meticulously maintained or restored can command well over $100,000, with highly documented GSX Stage 1 cars nudging toward $150,000 or more at auctions. This has turned these Buicks into true collectibles, often competing with Chevrolets, GTOs, and other high-end muscle cars for bragging rights. The combination of torque-laden performance, comfortable interiors, and the Buick nameplate has created an enduring mystique around these models. Next up, we shift gears to Dodge, unveiling a pony car that took the fight directly to the Ford Mustang and brought legendary HEMI power to the masses. Dodge was not about to be left out of the pony car craze. The brand's answer to the Ford Mustang was the 1970 Dodge Challenger, which shared much of its underpinnings with the Plymouth Barracuda. The Challenger RT brought distinctive body lines, a wide array of V8 powertrains, and, at the pinnacle, the legendary 426 cubic inch HEMI. With a factory-rated 425 horsepower, though it was likely underrated, the HEMI engine turned the Challenger RT into a serious track weapon. Depending on your choice of transmission, you could see 0 to 60 miles per hour times around 5.4 seconds, which was extremely quick for its day. The styling of the 1970 Challenger spoke volumes about the era. A wide front grille, dual headlights, and muscular rear haunches gave it an unmistakable presence on the street. Buyers could order bold stripes, rear wings, hood scoops, and even a shaker hood that protruded through a cutout in the hood. Inside, you could opt for bucket seats, a console-mounted shift, and plenty of brightwork. The Challenger quickly became a symbol of upper might, beloved by those who wanted something just a bit different from the more commonplace Mustang or Camaro. While a regular Challenger RT was relatively accessible, one that came equipped with the 426 HEMI commanded a premium, often hovering around $4,500 or slightly more. For the early 1970s, that was a hefty price tag, reflecting the performance prestige of that dual quad-fed HEMI engine. If you held on to such a car and kept it pristine, you would be looking at auction figures in the $300,000 bracket today. That is testament to the HEMI's legendary reputation and the enduring love for Mopar muscle. The combination of looks, big horsepower, and exclusivity means that a HEMI Challenger is one of the top-tier collectible muscle machines on the market. For many enthusiasts, the 1970 Dodge Challenger HEMI RT is one of those bucket list dream rides. Stay tuned, because next we will explore Pontiac's way of combining a giant 455 cubic inch engine with the sleek lines of the early 1970s Firebird. Pontiac's Firebird had already made waves with the Trans Am trim, introducing a thrilling mix of performance and style to challenge the Chevrolet Camaro and Ford Mustang. By the 1971 model year, Pontiac engineers decided to push the envelope by offering the 455 cubic inch HO engine in both the Formula and Trans Am versions. While there is occasional confusion about nomenclature, you can consider this engine as the 455 HO, which was frequently labeled in factory documents in a similar fashion to Chevrolet's LS engines. Rated at around 335 horsepower, the 455 HO was known to be underrated, and many testers believed it delivered closer to 350 or 360 horsepower in real-world conditions. Mated to a 4-speed manual transmission, the 1971 Trans Am 455 HO was more than capable of ripping from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 5.4 seconds, with the quarter-mile passing by in the high 13-second range. Even though emissions regulations were right around the corner, 1971 still allowed for relatively high compression setups, so this was arguably one of the last truly unbridled big block engines from Pontiac. In addition to the powerful engine, the Trans Am trim was all about style, featuring a signature hood bird by 1973, front and rear spoilers, fender vents, and a special shaker scoop on the hood. These cars had a more European-inspired feel to their styling than some of their boxier muscle car rivals. A 1971 Trans Am with the 455 HO would have cost around $4,700, which was quite a sum for a Pontiac in that period. Nowadays, examples that are in showroom condition or fully restored can fetch anywhere from $80,000 to well over $100,000. As one of the last muscle cars from the pre-emissions clampdown era, the 1971 Firebird Trans Am 455 HO continues to captivate collectors with its blend of good looks, robust performance, and exclusivity. It remains one of Pontiac's proudest achievements from the golden age of muscle. Next, we dive under the bow tie, heading over to Chevrolet's stable to explore one of the fiercest engines ever put in a Chevelle. Chevrolet's midsize body platform reached legendary status in 1970 when it housed the mighty Chevelle SS454. This car offered a range of potent engines, but the king of the hill was the LS6 version of the 454 cubic inch V8, rated at a sensational 450 horsepower. While that figure was already eye-opening, many enthusiasts believed it to be on the conservative side. With a forged crankshaft, 4 bolt mains, high compression pistons, and a wild solid lifter cam, the LS6 meant business at every turn of the key. When you paired this powerhouse with a close ratio 4-speed transmission, the Chevelle SS became a dominating force at stoplights and drag strips alike. Magazine road tests from the era reported 0 to 60 miles per hour times in the mid 5-second bracket and quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range, with many drivers boasting even better numbers after minor tweaks. More importantly, the Chevelle SS6 made a statement visually. A bulged hood with optional cowl induction, blacked-out grille, racing stripes, and SS badging ensured onlookers knew this was no ordinary family sedan. The optional hood pins, functional hood scoop, and optional bucket seats gave it a racy feel inside and out. The Chevelle's proportions and classic body lines contributed to an undeniably muscular stance. Price-wise, a new LS6 Chevelle SS in 1970 often hovered around $4,500, give or take, depending on additional options like power steering, air conditioning, or upgraded interior trims. Collectors today are prepared to spend upward of $300,000 for a numbers-matching, impeccably restored LS6 Coupe, especially if it comes with documentation such as a build sheet or window sticker. The Chevelle SS454 LS6 was undoubtedly a defining car of the muscle era, revered for its brutal torque and show-stopping presence. Even decades later, the mystique has not faded, and owning one places you in an exclusive club of enthusiasts who appreciate the raw nature of automotive performance before regulations took hold. If you thought the Chevelle was Chevrolet's only big block beast, stay tuned for our look at an incredibly rare Corvette option that took the LS6 concept to another level. Shifting gears but staying under the Chevrolet banner, we come to the 1971 Corvette ZR2. This was a rare and extraordinary package that slipped into the Corvette order guide for a single model year. The heart of the ZR2 was the same LS6 454 cubic inch engine found in the Chevelle, but it was conservatively rated at around 425 horsepower for 1971. Chevrolet had started to lower compression ratios and tweak the tuning due to upcoming emissions standards, yet the LS6 was still a formidable powerhouse. The ZR2 package added heavy-duty suspension components, improved brakes, an aluminum radiator, and other race-inspired features. That made this Corvette more track-ready than the typical big block option. Externally, a ZR2 looked almost identical to any other big block Corvette. You got the signature 454 badging on the hood and the flared fenders. There were no stripes or special body add-ons to betray its enhanced underpinnings. This made the ZR2 something of a stealth monster, capable of lighting up the tires or carving corners with more confidence than a standard Corvette. Road tests indicated 0 to 60 miles per hour times around 3 seconds and quarter-mile passes in the mid-13-second zone, extremely competitive numbers for 1971. Priced around $7,600, this package was quite expensive compared to a base Corvette or even many other muscle cars of the era. Consequently, very few were produced. This rarity, combined with the undeniable performance pedigree, has turned the 1971 Corvette ZR2 LS6 into a holy grail for collectors. Auction results for documented original ZR2s can eclipse $300,000, and rarer convertible versions have sold for even more. If you think about it, that kind of investment reflects just how special and elusive this one-year-only option truly is. For many enthusiasts, the idea of a near-race-ready Corvette with an LS6 under the hood is enough to inspire fervent bidding wars and plenty of admiration on the show circuit. Next on our list is another Mopar legend that often gets overshadowed by its siblings, but had the same monstrous HEMI under the hood. Dodge's performance lineup included more than just the Charger and Challenger. Case in point, the Coronet-based Super Bee. Originally conceived as a lower-priced alternative to the Charger and Plymouth Roadrunner, the Super Bee was still offered with the same range of engines, including the fierce 426 cubic inch HEMI. By 1970, the Super Bee featured bold graphics, a unique front end known as the Bumblebee front grille, and a stripped-down interior to keep costs and weight down. This formula gave it a competitive edge on the drag strip, especially when equipped with the HEMI. With the 426 HEMI sitting under the hood, pumping out a rated 425 horsepower, the Super Bee could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 5.3 seconds and rip through the quarter mile in about 13.5 seconds. These figures would fluctuate slightly in different tests, but they remain a testament to the car's performance potential. While it may not have had the flashiest interior trimmings or the same prestige as a Charger, Daytona, or a Challenger RT, the Super Bee earned respect through raw muscle and Mopar engineering. When new, the 1970 Dodge Super Bee HEMI could be had for roughly $4,000, making it a relative bargain in the performance car market, although still quite a chunk of money for many working-class buyers. Today, a well-documented HEMI Super Bee in excellent condition routinely crosses auction blocks at figures that can surpass $100,000. Because fewer people ordered the stripped-down variant with the pricey HEMI option, survivors are quite sought after by collectors who appreciate both its rarity and its drag strip pedigree. The mystique around the 426 HEMI continues to drive interest, and the Super Bee remains an underappreciated piece of Mopar history for those who love something a little off the beaten path. If you think all the big performance was gone by 1973, you will be surprised when we explore the next Pontiac that battled emissions rules and still delivered impressive muscle. By 1973, the golden era of muscle cars was already dimming. Insurance premiums were sky-high, unleaded gasoline concerns were looming, and emission controls were chipping away at horsepower ratings. Yet, Pontiac was not ready to throw in the towel just yet. Enter the 1973 Firebird Trans Am 455 SD, where SD stood for Super Duty. It might have been a later arrival, but it still managed to deliver legitimate big block performance while many competitors had already begun stepping down. Pontiac heavily upgraded the engine internals, including a reinforced block, special high-flow cylinder heads, a performance-oriented camshaft, and a host of other durability improvements. Although factory ratings placed the 455 Super Duty at around 290 to 310 horsepower, depending on the source and net versus gross numbers, it performed more like an early 1970s engine. With a 4-speed manual transmission, the 1973 Trans Am 455 SD could bolt from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 5 seconds, clocking quarter-mile times in the mid-13-second range. For 1973, that was almost unheard of and represented the last vestige of the true muscle car spirit. It also featured the iconic Trans Am styling, front and rear spoilers, shaker hood, bold graphics, and that memorable screaming chicken hood decal, though it was not quite as large as the later versions. From the factory, a 1973 Trans Am 455 SD would have likely cost you around $5,500, making it one of the pricier Pontiacs in the lineup. Today, the rarity and legendary status of the Super Duty engines have catapulted values into the six-figure range. If you locate a numbers matching 1973 Trans Am 455 SD in excellent condition, you can expect to pay well over $100,000, and some particularly well-documented examples may go even higher. This car stands as proof that Pontiac was devoted to performance even in the face of increasing regulations, preserving the muscle car flame for at least a little longer. Next, we shift our attention to a mythical Mustang that earned a reputation for its giant motor and its understated exterior. Do not miss it. The Ford Mustang Boss 429, produced between 1969 and 1970, is often heralded as one of the most enigmatic and desirable muscle cars ever built. In truth, production totals were quite limited, with just over 1,300 examples produced across both years. Ford's goal with the Boss 429 program was primarily to homologate the massive semi-hemispherical-headed V8 for NASCAR competition, so the street version was stuffed under the hood of a Mustang. The resulting car was far more understated than many of its muscle car peers. In fact, the Boss 429 had very few stripes and a relatively subtle aesthetic compared to the flamboyant Mach 1 and Boss 302 designs. Despite the lack of visual flair, the Boss 429 was a beast underneath. Factory ratings hovered around 375 horsepower, though many suspect it was underrated, with real output closer to 450 horsepower when properly tuned. 0 to 60 miles per hour times in the low to mid 5-second bracket were reported, along with quarter-mile runs in the high 13-second range. Such performance was impressive, but perhaps even more interesting was the engine's potential for high rounds per minute power, thanks to the racing-inspired cylinder heads and robust bottom end. This engine was built for sustained speeds, making it a favorite among those who dreamt of taking it out to the track. Back in 1970, a Boss 429 Mustang would have set you back around $5,000, which was a big chunk of change for a Ford pony car. However, if you had the foresight to buy and keep one in tip-top shape, your investment would pay off handsomely in the modern collector market. Documented Boss 429 Mustangs have sold anywhere from $200,000 to as high as $350,000 at auction, depending on originality, mileage, and provenance. The mystique of the Boss 429 remains strong, as it symbolizes Ford's commitment to racing technology during the golden era of muscle, bundled into a street-legal package that still looks remarkably restrained. Coming up, we return to Pontiac's stable for a GTO that captured hearts with a ram air system and a look that demanded attention. When the subject of muscle cars comes up, it is almost impossible to avoid mentioning the Pontiac GTO. Credited by many as one of the very first muscle cars in the 1960s, the GTO enjoyed a strong following well into the 1970 model year. By that time, it had freshened styling that included a new polyurethane molded front end, giving it a more contemporary and aggressive look. The GTO was built on the same body platform as the Chevelle, so enthusiasts already knew this car had the bones for real performance. Pontiac offered a range of engines, but the Ram Air packages were the clear choice for serious speed. At the top of the heap was the Ram Air IV. This 400 cubic inch engine, rated at around 370 horsepower, featured upgraded cylinder heads, an aggressive camshaft, and a high-flow intake system. 0 to 60 miles per hour came in at around 5.1 seconds, while the quarter-mile elapsed in the mid-13-second range. The Ram Air 4 truly exemplified Pontiac's commitment to performance engineering, offering not just raw grunt, but also well-designed airflow systems that gave it an edge. Moreover, the GTO's body lines, signature hood scoop, and optional Judge package, if you wanted even more visual pop, made the car stand out on the streets. A Ram Air 4-equipped GTO in 1970, loaded with options, could cost roughly $4,600 or more, marking it as one of the pricier variants in Pontiac's lineup. Today, a perfectly restored or well-preserved Ram Air 4 GTO can fetch near or even over $100,000. Many collectors seek them out for their combination of classic muscle car looks, storied heritage, and impressive power. Even though the market is filled with Chevrolets, Mustangs, and Mopars, the GTO brand continues to command a passionate following, and the 1970 model with the Ram Air 4 package stands as a high point of Pontiac's performance legacy. We still have one dark horse left, a Chevrolet that is part car, part truck, and surprisingly quick when fitted with the right engine. Do not go away. Our final contender for the quickest rides of the early 1970s is something of a curveball. The Chevrolet El Camino SS combined the front end and cabin of a Chevelle with the bed of a pickup truck, creating a vehicle that blurred the lines between passenger car and workhorse. Despite its unconventional appearance, the El Camino was no slouch in the performance department, especially when ordered with the LS6 version of the 454 cubic inch big block. Like the Chevrolet L6, it was rated at 450 horsepower and delivered explosive torque that could leave plenty of sports cars in the dust. Factory and magazine test times vary, but some sources claim that an LS6-equipped El Camino could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 5 seconds flat under perfect conditions, with the quarter mile arriving in the low 13-second range. Those figures might be optimistic for a heavier hybrid vehicle, but the LS6 was undeniably potent, and the El Camino's rear-wheel traction could be surprisingly good if equipped with wide tires and the right suspension options. The sight of an El Camino pulling up at the drag strip, tailgate and all, only to blow past the competition, was enough to raise eyebrows everywhere. On the sticker back, in 1970, an El Camino SSLS6 might have run you around $4,000, though precise pricing can be tricky to pin down based on specific options. These days, however, a legitimate, numbers-matching LS6 El Camino can command over $100,000 at auction. While the Chevelle LS6 might garner more mainstream attention, the El Camino's quirky mix of utility and raw power has made it a cult favorite. Collectors appreciate its rarity and the novelty of a car truck that can whip many traditional muscle cars in a straight line. The El Camino SSLS6 is a perfect example of how creative manufacturers got in order to cover multiple market segments while still delivering serious performance. Now that you know the 10 contenders, we will explore how performance times vary, how prices soared, and what makes these cars so special. Performance times for these muscle cars, as cited in magazines of the era, can be somewhat variable. Test conditions, tire technology, transmission choices, and even altitude played a significant role in how quickly these cars sprinted to 60 miles per hour. Many magazines use drag strip test procedures that might differ from modern methods. Therefore, numbers like 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.0 seconds or quarter-mile runs in the low 13-second range should be seen as approximate best-case scenarios. Still, these machines had undeniable potency, evidenced by their large displacement V8 engines that often produced well over 400 horsepower, even if official ratings sometimes told a more conservative story. Insurance costs also shaped the muscle car landscape. As young drivers flocked to buy these quick machines, insurance companies caught wind of the trend and raised premiums significantly. This factor, combined with new emission regulations that would take effect in the early 1970s, put the squeeze on the muscle car market. By 1972 and 1973, compression ratios were dropping, and net horsepower ratings were introduced, causing some confusion among buyers who saw horsepower figures decline. In reality, the horsepower cuts were partly due to mechanical changes, but also partly to the switch from gross to net rating systems. When looking back today, American men aged 50 to 75 often remember these cars with great fondness. Some owned them, some admired them from afar, and others heard tales of their legendary status through magazines, movies, and neighborhood drag strip stories. There is a strong emotional connection to that era, as the muscle car represented youth, freedom, and the thrill of unrestrained performance. Cruising down Main Street or heading to the local drive-in was an event, and seeing the bright colors, hearing the rumbling exhaust, and feeling the torque under your feet left a lasting impression on that generation. Next, we will discuss the skyrocketing collector market, along with some vital disclaimers on verifying authenticity and originality when buying one of these prized classics. One of the most striking aspects of these legendary muscle cars is their dramatic rise in value. What once could have been purchased for $3,000 to $5,000 in the early 1970s may now command six-figure bids at prominent collector auctions. Documentation is key to reaching these high values. Potential buyers want to see factory build sheets, window stickers, matching engine block numbers, and thorough restoration receipts that verify the car's originality. High-end auction houses always emphasize authenticity, and any modifications or missing parts can reduce the final selling price. Original paint colors, correct interior trims, and the presence of rare factory options all factor into a car's desirability. Because of the substantial sums changing hands, buyers must remain vigilant about clones or tributes, which are cars that started life as lower performance models but have been upgraded to look and perform like their high-performance cousin. In some cases, sellers might misrepresent these cars, leading to legal disputes. For example, a 1970 Chevelle that started with a small block engine can be turned into an LS6 replica, but it will not have the same authenticity or collector value. That said, tribute cars are a valid choice for enthusiasts who want the look and performance without paying the top-tier prices of a fully documented original. It is simply important to be clear on what you are getting. For many men aged 50 to 75, the allure of owning a piece of their youth is worth the cost. Some are downsizing other possessions or using retirement funds to finally buy that 1970 Dodge Challenger, HEMI, or 1973 Trans Am 455 SD they drooled over as teenagers. Others have found that these cars can become family heirlooms, passed down to children or grandchildren who share the same passion for classic American muscle. While the market may fluctuate, the consistent demand for well-preserved, documented muscle cars from the early 1970s remains strong, bolstered by nostalgic appeal and the undeniable fact that these were some of the last cars built before emissions rules heavily curtailed horsepower. As we conclude our trip down memory lane, it is clear that these 1970s muscle cars stand as living testaments to an era of unrestrained automotive passion. Their raw horsepower, unforgettable styling, and booming exhaust notes continue to stir excitement for those who recall that exhilarating time. Even younger enthusiasts have discovered their timeless appeal, ensuring these machines endure for future generations. If you are considering buying one, do thorough research, verify authenticity, and prepare for a life-changing experience behind the wheel. Thank you for joining us, and may these legends always roar in our collective memory.